All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to yet another exciting podcast from the All Caps crew, the ALCP. Ladies and gentlemen, we are very appreciative of all of you for tuning in when you do, and I'd also like to thank all of those people, especially Richard Boswell, for being on the Get Up, Stand Up tour at this point. Now, we seem to be having a little bit of trouble with that live stream here, I think. So please yell out in the chat room, ladies and gentlemen, if we're having any problems with that there. Other than that, today my very special guest is Simba, and much like the Lion King, he's going to tell us to remember who we are. That after 100 years, thereabouts, prohibition, Simba remembers that which matters most. That after 100 years of these people sending their armies to destroy us, we are still here.
Pretty much, man. We're still around.
All right. So, Simba, why don't you just give us a little bit of a background on NZ Weed and yourself and how you kind of came about?
NZ Weed. So NZ Weed currently is New Zealand's biggest media website that focuses exactly just on that, cannabis. We've been around for a couple of years now, and our main goal is to pretty much put out some content that targets people that are willing to re-educate themselves about cannabis. Now, personally, I grew up thinking that cannabis was this big evil thing. I didn't smoke cannabis until I was about 22 because I thought that if you smoked weed, you were going to become dumb, become a criminal, and all these type of things. After smoking weed later in life, I realized that all of that was wrong. It pretty much became one of my goals in life to try and change that perception of cannabis.
Yeah. Now, I just recently watched The Incredibles 2, and they actually came up with that entire concept that it's about changing perception. Right? This movie was talking about superheroes and how they wanted to change their perception so that the public would now support them. And indeed, cannabis suffers from that big perception problem to a large degree. These silly, unkempt stoners and their laziness and that kind of thing. No wonder they can't get anything done. But the problem is with those stereotypes is it actually doesn't matter what somebody looks like to a large degree. Are they a good, honest, decent, honourable person? And do they get their job done at the end of the work? And if so, who cares what they smoke at the end of the day?
Exactly. If we're able to go to work and work harder than come back and enjoy alcohol or, a cigarette or something like that, it makes no sense that cannabis shouldn't be added to those type of things. Now, regardless of what you look like, who you are, what you do, you'll find cannabis in all levels of society. It used to be seen as like a low socio. These type of people smoke cannabis because they've got nothing else better to do, and etc. And the elite people don't smoke cannabis. I can tell you now that cannabis is found everywhere. Whether you're a lawyer, a doctor, all these type of people do enjoy cannabis. And why not? If we can smoke cigarettes and drink alcohol, it makes no sense that a substance that's less bad for you is still, illegal. It just makes no sense to me.
Well, maybe it's because you're not making a profit off of it being illegal. Maybe you're not supplying arms to the police. Maybe you're not on the downstream of people who get paid to enforce the laws and things of that nature. An entire industry could be created by cannabis. Thus, an entire industry had to be created in order to control it.
Mm-hmm.
The media industry.
Trying to control it. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? How much of our taxpayer money gets spent on this war on drugs?
$400 million per year.
And it's crazy because my point of view is if we were to make this legal, regulate it and do it properly, how much money could we make? We've seen globally what happens. We've seen all over the world, these different places legalize cannabis in different ways and nothing bad has happened. We've actually seen a decrease in the amount of young people smoking. We've seen a decrease in all crimes related to cannabis, And at the end of the day, no one's dying. If you can show me someone who overdoses off cannabis, I'll quit smoking.
Yeah. Apparently, according to the historical context, cannabis has actually been more worshipped throughout time than any other religious figure. And indeed, if you are going to be busting people for it, and this has been trialled in court before, you could be said to be persecuting their religious sacrament.
Man, I've been to a Rastafarian church where they partake in this before they engage spiritually, you know? I believe, yeah, all around, I don't know how long people have been smoking this, but I can promise you it's a very long time and nothing bad has happened. The worst thing that's happened with cannabis is the fact that it got made illegal.
Yeah. As Jack Herer, the author of the Hemp Bible, said, the only person who's died from cannabis is the person who got shot in the back running away from the cops.
Oh, and I mean, how come we're making criminals out of people who smoke and grow a plant? This makes no sense.
If people who were crazy were in charge of society, then suddenly the cannabis laws would make total sense, wouldn't they?
Yeah. I mean, we are seeing change, though. Here in New Zealand, we are seeing change, but it's just sad that this change is taking so long. I mean, traditionally, New Zealand is usually at the forefront of social change. Yeah, for this cannabis stuff, something that we enjoy and are very good at, we're at the back watching the world do it properly. You know what I'm saying? It makes no sense.
Well, the fact that it doesn't make any sense is one thing, but again, it's about perception, as you said before. How could we make it make sense? Like, let's say theoretically, let's say cannabis was as dangerous as it was. It doesn't actually, or as dangerous as it's said to be, rather. Let's say theoretically, you then went and busted people, traumatised them, put them in jail, spent a whole bunch of cops' money and things of that nature. And then, of course, the cops themselves get traumatised because they think that what they're doing is wrong. And then they, otherwise good cops, would then bow out of the force, and who's left? You know, the ones who actually enjoy doing it. You know, there's a whole bunch of on-flow effects, even if cannabis was dangerous, which it isn't, which are extraordinarily negative effects of simply the kind of enforcement that we use, okay? The use of force should be the absolute last resort in any case, and it should only be initiated if you're attacked physically first. I mean, I don't know about you, ladies and gentlemen, but I've spoken to police and they know for a fact that if they're going in there to arrest some cannabis smokers, they're not liable to get hurt. But if they're going in there to arrest some drunks, on the other hand, anything can happen.
Like, I mean, I've talked to cops, and this is a funny one. I've smoked weed with cops, New Zealand police, fact. And obviously, I'm not about to out those type of people, but I can promise you that as soon as cannabis becomes legal, these dudes are going to be happy that they don't have to waste so much of their time busting down someone's door and then walking in to find a little bit of a plant and a bong or something stupid like that. You know, there's real crime out there. There's people that are actually getting hurt. There's drugs that are out there destroying society, and we're spending all of our resources focusing on cannabis. It makes no sense. And I mean, like, the thing that troubles me is we have so much stress and stuff put on us by policemen. And I'm sitting here wondering, why don't you go catch a normal criminal? Someone who's actually hurting people or destroying something or stealing something. You know what I'm saying? It's not that hard to do. Like, how come we're able to find where, if someone wants to find meth on the street, they don't have to try so hard to find, like, a meth shop or where people get that stuff from. How come cops can't do that? Oh, that's right, because they're spending all of their time chasing a plant.
And the plant's winning that war.
It's won the war. You can't kill a weed. You can't kill a weed that has been around for so long that isn't actually doing anything wrong.
Well, the plant has won the war. However, there's other people who simply just won't give up, even though they've already been defeated. You know what I'm saying? Like that Japanese guy who was on some island somewhere since like 1942 or something like that. He was taking pot shots at 747s that were landing at a nearby airport with an old school rifle because he didn't know that the war was over and they lost. All right, and what we've got right now is the same thing on a society-wide scale.
Yeah, but I mean, if we're going to change that view of cannabis, I think the first question is, what how do we do that? Do we keep doing what we've done? Now, don't get me wrong. I have this thing. It's really cool to smoke a joint outside Parliament. Like I understand what you're trying to achieve there. Okay, it's really cool to do a protest and to get a sign and to paint it and to walk down some street. I understand what you're trying to do there. But at the end of the day, if we want the change that we actually want to see, we need to start doing it properly. We need to know how these laws are going to be affected, talk to the right people and get the right people at the front of this fight. We need the lawyers and the doctors and the people who have had great lives, used cannabis this whole time secretly, to come forward and be like, look, it's not such a bad thing. And it's slowly happening. It is slowly happening. But yeah.
Just before the show is on a break, and I had a thought, I want to run it by you.
Mm-hmm.
What if the Legalise Cannabis Party's elected, and I envisaged the amount of crying that would happen, that moment, like, it's over, right? But then a second thought occurred to me. What if we didn't become part of the coalition? What if another group of government got in and managed to block any legalisation of cannabis for that point? Then the last thought that occurred to me is, what if the Legalise Cannabis Party, all their candidates, that kind of thing, actually said to people around the country that if you're about to get busted, or if you're getting busted, if the cops are at your door, immediately message our Facebook site, and we will send a candidate round to your house, and we will put it out on social media that anybody within the immediate area within 45 minutes, you need to be at this person's house with your pipe or your bong or just a little bit of weed for personal use, and start smoking up right outside the cop car and say, no, you can't arrest him, no, you can't take his plants, or you have to take us all. And then you have our candidates there and all of that kind of thing who are in Parliament, MPs, like this is your electorate MP, I want to be arrested. If you want to keep arresting people for cannabis, you're going to have to arrest your own members of Parliament. That was the thought that occurred to me, and I was like, whoa.
Well, that's a big thought. I mean, like, strength in numbers, of course. If you could get that to happen, I'm sure it would have some effect on the cops' ability to arrest everyone. But yeah, I think once we get it is about working together. One problem that I have in the cannabis community at the moment is it feels like there's not much collaboration. There's these people who are doing this and there's these people who are doing that. And because everyone's not working together, we're not really seeing the change that we could be seeing. It's all about collaboration, working together. So I think in regards to your point, the more people that we can get to support us and actually come out of the cannabis closet, I'd like to say, is it's going to be the better.
Well, it would be better for everybody, and the concept here is that you raise a very salient point about working together, and indeed that's actually partially what this podcast was originally supposed to do, is bring on people from all over the different aspects of the legalization movement, regardless of their position within it. If they speak with authority about the subject, if they've got experience in it, we want the the electors, not the voters, the electors, because only electors can elect, voters can only vote, you see. We want them all to actually be knowledgeable about cannabis, but also we want to make sure that those people who are already knowledgeable about cannabis, people like yourself, become familiar with the party and what we actually represent and that kind of thing, so that we are increasing that network, we are actually communicating with each other, cards on the table, this is what we want, that kind of thing. The more open communication there happens to be in a society, the more progress overall that society makes.
Yeah, definitely. I think, collaboration is huge, and at the moment it's what the space needs. But yeah, I think people are slowly coming together. Also because a lot of people are competing for their place in the upcoming market, I think that creates most of it. But I think once everyone kind of puts that to the side of me, we got this. It won't take long. I mean, we're very, very, very close.
That's something that occurred to me during the podcast with the mayor of the Aotearoa, is that it's not going to actually be a companies are proposing the solution. It actually has to be made at a central government level. Because they have the Health Act, the Misuse of Drugs Act, and all of these things, and the agriculture regulations and things like that. And those three things are essentially drafted as legislation specifically to block cannabis at every turn, to block people even looking into cannabis as an option at every turn.
Well, there's definitely another thing that's important to understand is, like, a lot of people come to me and they're like, why haven't New Zealand made cannabis legal? And I'm saying, look, you don't just walk into office one day, get a bit of paper and write, weed is now okay. And then we have all of these things to change, okay? But you're right. Whether or not it's a change from up here or a more local change, it's going to be interesting to see.
Well, what he raised was the issue. I asked him, is there a possibility of, say, passing an amendment under regional governance to say, hey, you can grow hemp at least, or you can grow a crop of cannabis or something, and it's under the jurisdiction of the local council. And he says, actually, what you've got to do is you've got to go to central government in New Zealand, which isn't even a government department. It's actually a private corporation that okays or no-kays any legislation that any local council wants to put out. It's corporate governance. It's already here. We have no freedom to decide in our regions at all. And the only way that we can actually change that is from that central government level. But that's so out far of the reach of people who actually really want to change the country massively that it seems almost impossible. However, I believe that right now there is a wave, a very conscious wave of support for cannabis that is rolling towards this country, and I think we're out in the back wops or whatever at the moment now. But I think if we start pedaling our little cannabis surfboards really, really fast over the next 18 months between now and the referendum and the next election, by the time that wave breaks, we should be able to carry it all the way into Parliament, baby. One can only hope.
No, it's definitely coming. Yeah, I mean, referendum coming up soon, followed by elections and all those beautiful things. I truly believe that this is a time we're going to see it happen. But again, we need collaboration and we need to do it right.
Well, and activation as well. And we found a lot of the conversations that you really have with people are actually quite fun because you're free-firing ideas, you're coming up with solutions to things, and you're doing them together as a team. And the cool thing about it is, or at least a lot of my interactions over the last 10 years with activists on this issue, is that none of them are in it necessarily for their own personal benefit. They need cannabis to survive and live their daily life, but that's not why they do it. They do it for the people who don't have the ability to fight for those rights, you know, the people who are too sick and or dying, who can't even speak up for themselves.
100%.
Where is this heading in terms of politics? Because I feel, personally, very betrayed by that medical cannabis will be legal in 100 days, and then I see Joan Cowie from the Auckland Patients Group die after that 100 days. After cannabis
100 days was huge for me too. You know what I'm saying? How long do we have to wait? How many people will have to break the law to get cannabis until we see some change? You know, how many more criminals? You know, they're branding us criminals because we take a plant or we grow a plant, or in some extreme cases distribute a plant. You know, but I mean, as you just said. I know countless people who use cannabis recreationally, and the same amount of people who also use it for some type of medical thing, you know? And it's just so sad that we can take cannabis instead of all these pharmaceuticals that really mess you up. You can take this one thing to treat so many things and make you feel better. Makes no sense.
Yeah. Unless, of course, you're clipping the ticket on the other hand and have a major pharmaceutical contract with the government or something of that nature, in which case it makes perfect sense. In fact, it makes not only sense, it makes dollars. Quite a few of them, actually.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, did I miss something? Or is competition supposed to be, one of the concepts of living in an allegedly capitalist society like we live in, right? Whereas I see a whole bunch of people who really don't like competition at all and have taken measures to prevent the competition of cannabis from being on the marketplace, really. Have made it remarkably difficult.
Yeah, it's sad to see, to be honest. But yeah, I'm really hopeful that, in the next 1 to 2, 3 years, worst case scenario, we see something real happen.
What form would cannabis legislation take in you? Ideally, I'm not talking about what you think you can get or whatever. I'm talking about your deepest hope across the spectrum, legal in terms of recreational, medical, industrial. How would you like to see it happen?
Good question. I think now that I've travelled around the world and see how it works in different places, deep down, I just want to see this legalised. I don't want people to fear smoking cannabis because it makes them a criminal. I don't want people to have this big stigma around consuming this drug. Obviously, me and my company are one of the only companies that say medical cannabis is great, but we want to take it that step further and believe that recreational cannabis is a huge thing. I would love to see recreational cannabis, and I'll be very firm on that. Recreational cannabis, 100% legal in New Zealand to anyone over the age of, now it's really hard here because in America it's 21. You know what I'm saying? Over here we do a lot of things based around the age of 18. Studies out there show that you shouldn't even smoke weed until your brain is fully developed. So as soon as we can find out the right age, probably 21, I believe recreational cannabis should be set there. And just like we do alcohol and cigarettes, you go down to a place, you show your ID, you walk in, you get a consistent tested product every single time. You know what's in it, seed to sale, and you go home and you enjoy your cannabis. Now the whole grow at home thing, it's a mixed debate because I'm all for people growing their own cannabis. That's great, because then they get to not only smoke it but enjoy that process and know exactly what's gone into that product. And currently we have people in New Zealand who grow amazing cannabis. So I don't think that just because we make weed legal, we should stop these people from doing what they're doing. But with legal cannabis, what we'll see and what people have seen internationally is when people make their cannabis and then start trying to make it into oils and other more complicated things, sometimes that leads to a house exploding or something because they don't have proper technology and equipment to do it safely like some of these people with the money and resources. Now, why that's bad is then we see in the media, cannabis explosion, etc., etc. It's almost a bad stain on the cannabis market. So that's the only thing that makes me question whether or not people should be able to grow at home. Just because it's not the growing of the cannabis itself, it's when they start doing other things with it and then sometimes blow up their house, etc., etc. But as soon as we straighten out what New Zealand wants and what New Zealand kind of needs, I think recreational cannabis.
What I'd like is if you got a government advisor and you say, "Hey, bro, I've thought about growing some cannabis. What do you think I should do?" And they go, "Well, I don't know. How big's the space that you got to grow in? And what are your requirements? How much can you afford in your electricity and that kind of thing? What strain would really suit you? Do you want multiple strains essentially?" And they like at a WINS office, for example. You have your cannabis consultant at a WINS office, and you walk in, and he takes down your details. He fills out your forms. He susses you out, and he tells you everything that you need. You go out there, you do it, and you've got your education pamphlets and things like that. If you want to turn it into oil, don't turn it into butter. If you want to turn it into this, that, or the other, you're going to need some qualifications some very simple protocols on how to do it very, very safely and that kind of thing. Because ultimately, you talk about perception and being managed, that can really, really be helped, I think, by very official education being provided to people who actually start using it or growing it or needing it in any way, shape, or form. They need to be able to go to the authorities who will give them accurate information. And that's what's been problematic over the last few decades, is that the information that they've been getting from the authorities has not been accurate.
Yeah, definitely. Like, don't get me wrong. I have no problem with people, growing weed and making oils. I just have a bit of a problem with when their house blows up and people get hurt.
Yeah. Absolutely. In fact, we had a story about a guy who'd been blown up in his caravan because he was trying to use butane, flammable gas, in order to extract cannabis oil with the door closed in the caravan without ventilation. And it exploded. He flew like a cartoon character. And he was then taken to the hospital to have his wounds treated, and then straight off to jail, And it was just like, dude, the lack of education, is just like, think things through. And because you're really afraid that you might get busted, or you're a bit paranoid about asking questions, about finding out information and things like that, it causes people to take risks that they don't need to take.
One thing that we'll talk about quickly is no one currently enjoys, like, if you're in the normal black market and you don't have a regular trusted source or someone who grows for you, no one likes the current scoring situation. Right now, you have to walk up to it pretty much, like I'm talking maybe 50% of the normal cannabis market have to walk up to a stranger's house, knock on this door, wait for someone to open up this thing, and half of that time, he's an intimidating, or she's an intimidating person, and it's not a good experience. You have no idea what you're getting, absolutely no idea what you're getting. And one huge problem I have is when people say, look, I smoke medical cannabis, I smoke cannabis for my sleep, but I score from a random tinny shop, random drugs that I don't know what strain it is. That's my problem with the black market. Like, if I could currently go to a tinny shop and say, look, I need this type of strain to help me with my sleep, and then in the daytime I need this stuff to help me focus and stay awake, and you go, sweet, here you go, and it was a consistent product, I'd have no problem with what's currently happening. Because I don't care if it's illegal. Most of us don't. We are smoking cannabis, but it's just what I'm saying. There's no consistency. I don't know what I'm smoking. I don't know how it was growing, if you're going to a random tinny shop or getting something delivered.
Just
if we could change that.
Thought popped into my head. Hey, bro, have you got anything for my glaucoma? Oh, Hipper, have we got any of that blueberry left? Yeah, bro, I'll get a tinny up for you. Oh, sweet, bro. And then he brings the right strain with the right measurement in the tinny shop and that kind of thing. But the question is as well, how do you get that black market to the open market without risking the income in between of all the people who do actually supply cannabis to their friends, all those people who do supply those medical products and things like that, who aren't criminals and that kind of thing, but however their livelihood and their income sort of becomes threatened if cannabis becomes legal. And there are a lot of dealers who have openly expressed the fact that they don't want it legal because it threatens their income.
Okay, man, this is the argument that gets me in the most trouble in the cannabis community. Okay, currently we have a black market. Okay, 95%. Okay, and that's quite generous, of this black market sucks. Okay, just because the selection of products that people need to use medical cannabis is not there, consistent or available all year round. Okay, currently as we move towards a legal market, okay, it is up to these people to catch this wave. Okay, I'll all cards on the table. I am part of the black market and I run that shit well, but right now I'm looking at this legal market being like, never mind this rubbish, let's move towards that so I can do this properly, contribute back to something. I'm not too sure whether they're going to spend the tax that they take off distribution, all these type of things on health, education, roads, whatever. But if we can do this properly, without the cops trying to make us criminals and provide a proper product to people that want to smoke cannabis, I think that should be the end goal. And anyone in the black market right now should be looking at how they can join this wave. It's not about saying, I'm going to lose my money here, or I've been doing this for 5 years. Yeah, we all have, It's about learning finding those applications, learning how it works, and getting on top of that stuff now. Don't wait until it's just about to become legal. Start now, so when this wave hits, you don't have anything to complain about. I always hear a lot of rich white people are going to come into the market and take away the industry from these people that have been doing it for so long. And right now, these people are in the same situation as you. Probably differences, their resources. But right now, if you get on board right now, correct me if I'm wrong, there are a cannabis company in New Zealand that crowdfunded and now have a research license for cannabis. Okay? If they were able to go out there and do their mahi and get these things, why can't you? You know, let's not wait until the industry's done and all these people that are working hard right now to capitalize this and say, oh, look, they took our industry. No. It's no one's industry. It's the black market. Like, yeah, and that's my true thoughts. Like, people can't hate on this wave because this wave is better than the current situation. Current situation sucks. Criminal, hard to find, inconsistent. What are we doing? You know? But yeah, anyone who, man, honestly, I go so hard in this conversation, I get death threats from people who are just like, when it becomes legal, if I see you on the street, all this stuff, like I'm the reason they're going to lose their money, you know? If you're serious about cannabis and you want to keep your job, do it properly. Sign up, find out how to do it, start raising money, and do it properly. It's that simple.
That reminds me, actually, ladies and gentlemen, we went to the Get Up Stand Up Tour's first leg at the Avondale Markets, and we had a hell of a lot of people come into our private smoking lounge. We had a hell of a lot of people who were walking around with a little bit of discomfort who walked away fully comfortable. We had a whole bunch of people who had sick aunties, grandmas, a sick girlfriend who needs their cannabis. And they came down and Auntie Maki, our joint leader of the cannabis party, she had her remedies there for everybody, the Green Fairy remedies. And it was just really good to see the showing of support. And right now, as we speak, the Get Up Stand Up Tours in Helensville, and just had the first initial reports coming in from Richard just before the show here today, and he says there's a lot of response there as well. So this is something that is totally within the public consciousness right now, and there is a lot of support for legalization in cannabis. Now, it reminds me that if you're in the long grass, and there is a lion in the long grass, but your friends are also in the long grass, if you stick a signal in the air, if you stick your sail up, it's a question of which one of them finds you first, right? Your friends or the predators. And I think sometimes your friends are a lot closer than you think. Mm-hmm. And that's why we've got to stick our flags out there, eh?
I see, man. Yeah. Like a lot of the activists in this country, man, I firmly believe in this as a product and believe that this is positive for people, you know, and that's why we're here. You know, we don't do this. We don't fight so hard for this because we want to. We need to because someone has to. You know, not everyone like me. With my videos and all my media, I believe that currently I'm one of the only activists who smokes weed on camera, publicly. Wherever I am, I'm smoking cannabis in the street. Now, not everyone can do that. Okay, people have commitments, drug tests, and all these things, and that's why I push so hard, you know. And again, like a lot of the other activists out there, they come from a different generation, you know. A lot of young people do smoke cannabis, and we don't need people who are, teenagers and whatnot smoking cannabis and feeling like, okay, now I'm a criminal. Now this teacher said I'm gonna go to prison because I'm dumb, and now I'm losing brain cells. Like, we don't need this stuff. We need to combat this misinformation. And yeah, we're in the right step. But I mean, the work that you guys are doing and other activists out there and these green fairies and all these people, it's not going unnoticed.
What was very shocking directly after the election, speaking of the green fairies, is you have Jacinda Ardern going absolutely yes when it comes to cannabis on the thing. Absolutely yes, and then directly after the election. They send in the boys to arrest green fairies specifically. They hold it off on arresting them until after the election so that they wouldn't look as bad. That is cold, man.
And honestly, like, the sad thing about green fairies is most of them aren't doing this for money. A lot of them are taking a loss. I promise you, it is very expensive to provide medical cannabis to people. Promise you that, you know? And because they're doing such a good work and publicizing the fact that they can help people, that's it's sad. It's sad that they're even targeted. You know, like, don't get me wrong. If you're gonna kick down some dude's door and find, like, you know, a bunch of tinnies, and then in the same drawer like a whole stack of meth and some firearms and stuff, yeah, arrest that person straight up. So yeah. But if you walk into some, you know, and they're usually elderly, like, people who, you know, got a little farm out the back of their house beside their tomato plants. And you know what's worse? They walk in and they've got caps of, like, oil, you know, or some balm. You know, we're looking at these like, criminal, let's arrest these people and, like, ruin their family's life. Like, you know, it's stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We had a discussion the other day amongst the Joint Chiefs about how Māori culture differs to Pākehā culture in some aspects. One of them being that Māori culture has an incredibly large amount more respect for their elders and their kaumātua than perhaps the Pākehā do at some certain point. And when they told me that, I was like, yeah. I remember I was at a table drinking with these couple of guys, and they're both ex-military. One of them had been in World War II, and one of them had been in Desert Storm. Every time the kaumātua spoke up, the boy who was in Desert Storm, you know, 40 years old and everything, he immediately shut his mouth and listened to everything he said. When I started speaking or something like that, as the young fella, he'd immediately start talking over me.
Maybe you should have talked louder.
Oh, I did, and I won him over in the end. And he bought me like 8 beers.
Oh,
you know,
should have smoked the joint.
Well, I'm a we did, and he shouted me plenty of those too. I'm a remarkably charming person. I can get that shit done. It's it gets down to the point where conflict resolution comes into effect, right? And this is, I think, maybe the main role of people within the media and government is actually to resolve conflicts between two people. Talk to me. Okay, you talk to me. All right, Now, this is what he said. This is what he said. This is how he's feeling. This is how they're feeling. Now you both understand each other. How can we come to a resolution now, right? That's essentially the process in a nutshell. And the job of a journalist essentially is to make sure that accurate information is put out there in front of people. And I think that's an inherent responsibility that's been neglected somewhat in New Zealand, with a lot of biased journalism over many, many decades with regards to cannabis. And essentially the old saying is, if it's not being done right, you've got to do it yourself. And again, that's reason for the podcast, and I want to encourage everybody to start doing their own podcasts and live streams and things like that. The more the merrier. If there's 1,000 podcasts going in New Zealand every week in support of cannabis or whatever, the more the merrier. The more it saturates the airwaves, the harder it'll be to ignore us all.
100%. Yeah. I think the more media that we put out there, and because everyone lives on their phones, you know, no one understands that media now is so important. You can change the world with your cell phone, you know, just by putting it out there. And it sometimes shocks me that we have the sum of all of humanity's knowledge essentially in our pockets, and we just let it sit there, you know. I think that, when I first started doing cannabis stuff, it was quite interesting. I released my first cannabis documentary maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, and everyone was just like, what are you doing? This is stupid. This is the worst thing you've ever done. You know, like, there goes your employability. over the last couple of years with the changes that we have seen legally, I've noticed that the media has kind of like turned their view on cannabis and are now treating it as like a cannabis story. Let's run this cannabis story because now it's hot and it gives us a story that's quite interesting. And I think that's quite funny.
If I might add a proviso to that, now they've started on the synthetic cannabis, which they're not allowed to call under the Broadcasting Standards Act because they're synthetic drugs. Yeah.
There is no similarity between cannabis and synthetic cannabis.
Yeah.
You know, it's like that thing really did muddy the water for us a couple of years ago because everyone thought, no, this is synthetic weed. They've got weed and did something, and now they've got a legal version. No, that has nothing. Yeah, but I mean, that stuff's horrible. But like, I guess when it comes with education, we've got to need to reduce harm to people that use all drugs. Now, I think the problem with that comes with the word drugs. Okay, if whenever we say the word drugs, we say like drugs. If we were to use the word drugs, put it into education and talk about it how it is and say, look, there's a group of substances that people can do and it changes aspects of whatever. Inform people of what it does, the full side effects, and instead of saying like it makes you dumb, drugs are bad and created by the devil, and actually hit it with the proper information, we'll actually see less people using drugs. As soon as you make legal cannabis legal, the tinny shops who are selling to kids in uniform, they can't compete with the legal ones. Okay, so they close. So the only way that we ever see young people smoking weed is the same way that they're drinking alcohol and getting someone older to provide it for them, and that usually creates some type of responsibility when someone consumes it. So
yeah, I think one of the aspects that comes out there is, I don't know about you, but I drank under 18. And it was my mum who bought me some liquor on my 16th birthday. They took responsibility. We got really, really wasted and trashed. Decided not to drink so much anymore, and the job was done. That's how it is. And I think what's the worst thing that's going to happen with the cannabis? Well, first you're going to get happy, then you're going to get hungry, then you're going to get thirsty, and then you're going to get sleepy. All right, so you're just screwed, mate. There's just nothing you can do about.
Honestly, it absolutely blows my mind that with alcohol, when you turn 18, you're expected to drink. Yeah, when you turn 21, you're expected to drink a big thing. When you turn 30, let's drink again. After Christmas, drink. After a rugby game, drink. After anything, drink. But I can be on the beach or in a park smoking a joint, and I'm the criminal. This is not making me violent, as you just said. This makes me hungry and relaxed.
Well, the other question is well, how much bottles and boxes are you going to leave behind on the beach after you've smoked? Of course not. You're going to keep the roach because you're going to smoke it later.
There's no part of alcohol that, for me personally, trumps cannabis. People don't get abusive. People don't even look, and I don't even know the true stats behind this. But last I checked, cannabis doesn't impede your driving as much as alcohol.
I do have the stats on that, actually.
Really?
Yeah, there's a
yeah. What are they?
What's good is that if you look at a study and you go, okay, there's one aspect here it's alcohol, or one aspect here it's cannabis, that's called a single variant analysis. In California, they did a multivariant analysis. So, are you tired? Are you in a rush? Are you a young man full of testosterone? Are you on psychotropic drugs? Are you drunk? Are you on cannabis? They had that multivariant analysis. And overall, they found that when people crashed, when they had cannabis in their system, they found it was actually one of these other factors that caused the crash. They were in a rush and they were a young man and they had cannabis, but the crash was caused because they were in a rush and a young man, not because of the cannabis. In fact, they found a negative inverse relationship with the cannabis and the driving accidents and fatalities, that you are on average 30% less likely to get into an accident if you're on cannabis. Now, I postulate that the reason for that is that those other aspects that cause crashes and things like that, do you need psychotropic drugs if you've got good cannabis? Probably not. Are you in a rush when you're really, really high? No, you're not. Are you, and you see all of these factors. You probably not drunk because you're stoned instead. The only thing you've got out of there is, are you a young man or not? And if you're a young man and you're underage and you weren't able to purchase your cannabis, that wouldn't become a factor. And the last factor there is speed. And because cannabis affects the perception of the frontal lobe, things appear to move faster than they actually do. And overall, cannabis users drive a little bit slower. So all of the factors that could possibly cause an accident, cannabis mitigates. Hence, if you're smoking cannabis, 30% less likely to get into an accident for any other reason.
Preach.
Facts, ladies and gentlemen. Multivariant analysis. I love that shit.
Yeah. There they are.
I mean,
I got a question for you. Now, it's always important to look at the other side of things. Do you think that there'll be any negatives that come from legalization of cannabis?
I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
There are possible negatives that I could see of, which is corruption, corporate control, and the loss of personal sovereignty, licensing systems taking over people's privacy, and things of that nature. These are precautions that I'd like to see mitigated before any progressive legislation comes through the pike, to ensure that you're not going to have no corporate monopoly over it, nobody will, that everybody will have the right to use it as a human right, and there shouldn't be any corruption, and there should be full transparency. I mean, if you got that trifecta, I think there will be no problem with cannabis legalization across the board.
Nail on the head. Yeah, it's all about doing it properly, because I've been to places that do have legal cannabis that the laws are horrible. They got the laws wrong. And it would be, sometimes it's worse, like than the black market thing. So, yeah, we need to do it right.
That's right. Well, it comes down to personal sovereignty. The sovereignty of a country starts at the individual and works its way up to central government, not the other way round. And I think that the right to grow cannabis and be an entrepreneur and create your own business and make your own opportunities and create new products and do things with cannabis that haven't even been invented yet is something that the government doesn't need to help. Just like in Jurassic Park, if we would just step aside and trust in the people of New Zealand and their creativity and their work ethic, we wouldn't have any problems.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
100%.
Okay. Right. Simba, remember who you are, ladies and gentlemen. And this is a terrible I'm sorry, bro. And we're going to be... I'm going to stop apologising to you because you always say it's all good, bro. And now... There's the last element here is I just wanted to say, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I hope you've enjoyed it.
Shout out to everyone.
And also, we're trying to test out a little something, ladies and gentlemen. We were talking about smartphones before, Simba, and there's a little join online button at the top of the Aotearoa Legalise Cannabis Party page, ladies and gentlemen. So if you are capable of clicking on that Cannabis Party page there and going to, I think it's alcp.org.nz/join online, if I remember correctly, links should be in the description. We want to find out whether somebody can use their smartphone to fill out one of those membership forms online, so that way when Richard is out on the tour signing up new members and things like that, instead of having all these forms and having to mail them to me and me doing all the data entry trying to figure out what everybody's handwriting actually says, it'll just be put into the network, it'll just be put into the database automatically through that way. So if ladies and gentlemen, if you do sign up, please message the Cannabis Party page and let us know if it worked. If not, we've got to make some few adjustments on the page there. Other than that, Simba, some final remarks, some self-promotion, if you please. Go right ahead.
So anyone who's not currently following me, you can find me on everything at dontfollowsimba or New Zealand Weed. But yeah, shout out to everyone smoking weed and living like it's legal. Won't be long till we can do this anywhere we want in front of, without feeling like criminals. But yeah, thanks for your time, and it's been epic.
Cheers, bro. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. ALCP.org.nz is the website, and I hope you join us there soon and join the party as well. So we're going to be cranking it every single week with this podcast, ladies and gentlemen, reading up to that the referendum, should I say, and the election, whether it be called in 2020 or 2019. Regardless, we will be ready because we are preparing every day, and everything you do today, ladies and gentlemen, is preparation for what is required of you tomorrow. Thank you very much for listening, and cheers.